Great. Well, thanks, John. And I want to also welcome you once again to the Climate Forum number 12, hosted by Elders for Climate Justice, or ECJ for short. And I want to really thank you for joining us this evening. And I'm really pleased that so many of you have chosen to join us tonight. So over the next 75 minutes or so, we will be exploring the possibility of creating a community of climate warriors. But before we begin, I want to review very briefly a couple of things from our last climate forum earlier this summer. During that forum, we asked for feedback and suggestions regarding a draft version of a climate statement, which we hope eventually will be adopted by MKP USA. Well, we took those suggestions and modified that statement accordingly. We've actually created two separate statements, each with a slightly different purpose. The first one is a much shorter statement that we believe has a more positive tone. And that is the statement which we hope that MKP USA will eventually consider endorsing. The second is a longer statement, which we also modified based on your suggestions. We intend, at least at this time, to use this primarily for our own purposes, both for ECJ and the climate community, which we hope to create, using that statement as our guiding principles. We will begin tonight by sharing both versions with you. We will then move on and share with you a vision that we have for a community of climate warriors. And following that, we will move into breakout rooms where you will have the opportunity to give us feedback and share your ideas that you may have about such a community. We will then come back into the large group and capture many of those ideas. Lastly, we will talk about where we go from here. So with that, let's begin with the first shorter climate statement, which will be read by Stu Kennedy.
MKP USA proudly and urgently affirms its role as Earth steward and commits as an organization of men to serve the needs of the Earth and its human and non-human inhabitants in the midst of our current complex ecological crisis. This means we will educate ourselves about the needs of the planet and her inhabitants and about the damage that we humans are causing. We pledge to take both individual and collective actions, big and small, to address the crisis we have created. We will put particular emphasis on minimizing the harm to disadvantaged communities and non-human species. We commit to acting as good ancestors, considering the effects on the next 7 generations as we make today's decisions. In MKP, we have learned powerful tools: sitting in circles, telling our truths, being aware of our emotions and shadows, setting challenging stretches, and living our missions. With these tools, we will build compassionate and resilient communities essential for navigating the challenging times ahead.
Well, thank you, Stu. Next, we'll share the longer statement, and this one was compiled into a slideshow by Steve Simmer, and he will be narrating that. So, Steve?
Okay. The climate warrior community within the Mankind Project USA firmly believes that the climate crisis is real and is happening now. We call on all new warriors to step up and play our part in addressing this urgent issue. We recognize that the natural world is suffering severe degradation, leading to the extinction of countless species and a precarious future for us humans. As compassionate and strong men, it is our responsibility to fight for a way of life that supports Mother Earth and all living beings. The climate warrior community within MKP USA strongly encourages taking meaningful action to stop increased destruction of the environment. As important as the many issues and missions that new warriors are engaged in, none is more important than the climate crisis. The challenges that are occurring and those ahead are unprecedented in the history of our species. Earth's wildlife populations have plunged by an average of 69% in less than 50 years. It will take strong and immediate warrior action to pass on some reasonable remnant of biodiversity to the next 7 generations. When a global or national problem arises, it is the most disadvantaged who carry the brunt. Climate change's impact knows no bounds, affecting every corner of our planet and disproportionately impacts those who have contributed least to the problem. What we do as the Mankind Project USA can and will make a difference. While there are inspiring pockets of progress led by deeply committed individuals, there is much more that we can and must do. We in MKP have declared a commitment to Earth stewardship. Now we need to take warrior action to make this real. As we know, new warriors stand for the defenseless and speak for the voiceless. We are the ancestors for those who come after us, and we are the ones, the warriors, who can and need to speak and stand up for them. To pass on a world that can be survived by all beings, we must keep our swords sharp and our shields ready. New warriors can no longer remain silent in the face of what will be far more challenging world for the next generations and all our fellow beings. We know that acting as Earth stewards stands in line with our values: accountability, authenticity, compassion, generosity, integrity, leadership, intercultural competency, and respect. Accountability. We own the fact that we have taken and used natural resources freely and often unwisely, and that this use affects others. Authenticity. We recognize that we are flawed human beings and that we can do better. Compassion. We are aware that there are people around our country and our globe who are suffering far worse than we are. Generosity. We are cognizant that we will have to give of ourselves and our surplus so that others might have enough. Integrity. We speak the truth that some of our actions add to the dilemma, that our actions have consequences. Leadership. We no longer wait for someone else to step up and show the way. Intercultural competency. We remind ourselves that it is often the most disadvantaged who will bear the brunt of inaction. Respect. We hold everyone's view with respect, choosing to recognize that our respect for the earth, for those beings that we share this home with, and the people around the globe deserve equal respect. As a powerful community of Earth stewards, today we commit to a path of justice, self-examination, and action. The initiative of a climate community is led by Elders for Climate Justice.
Well, thank you, Steve. You guys came up with something I think is really great. So with that, we're going to move into the main portion of our presentation tonight, creating a community of climate warriors. And let me just take a minute, just a second to share my screen here. So everybody see that, and it's not blocked out or anything?
Looks good.
Okay, so let me start here. Okay. Let's see. So now that we have a statement and a purpose, where do we go from here? Over the last year, we Elders for Climate Justice have come up with some ideas that we think might be helpful. Although the vision that I described is certainly not set in stone. We present these as a means of getting a discussion started. During the breakout session and in the large group afterward, we will be asking for your feedback and your suggestions on how to move forward. And as I outline some of the ideas, if any of them hold particular interest for you, you might want to make a note of these. Similarly, if you disagree with anything we say or I present, or if you think that something might be left out, please make a note of that as well. So let's begin. So let's start with the whys. Why now and why us? First, why now? Well, time is running out. We are already seeing the devastating effects of climate-related disasters, rampant wildfires, record heat waves, and increasingly frequent and severe weather events, including tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. The overwhelming majority of climate and environmental scientists give us until the end of the decade, just over 6 years from now, to make drastic changes in how we live and treat the Earth. Otherwise, we will cross a point of no return and face a future of certain devastation for our planet. We need to raise awareness of the wide-ranging consequences caused by the climate crisis. As these impacts become more apparent, we are seeing more and hearing more about this in the mainstream media, but more attention is still needed. There is still a lack of awareness of the link between the climate crisis and personal and societal lifestyle choices. This needs to be made more abundantly clear. A place is also needed to learn about and to process the impacts of the climate crisis. When a person truly gets it, it may have a profound personal impact on them. It may stir up a wide range of emotions, including grief, depression, despair, guilt, and perhaps even shame. And it is important to have some place to process these emotions along with the necessary tools and support. That would be a fine start. However, we also need to provide opportunities to move forward and to take action as part of a larger supportive community. It's been said that the antidote to grief and action is despair. So why us? The common values that we share through our involvement with the Mankind Project are uniquely suited for this work. You just saw and heard these, which include accountability, authenticity, compassion, generosity, integrity, leadership, intercultural competency, and finally, respect. Now that we've touched on the why now and why us, let's consider what a community of climate warriors might actually look like. First of all, I want to point out that this community will not be limited only to MKP brothers. Anyone is welcome to join us. Initially, however, we will likely focus on MKP members or affiliates, such as individuals in open eye groups, as we begin creating this community because of the uniqueness of our shared values that I just mentioned. We hope to create a community where these values are incorporated into the norms of who we are and what we do. I also want to point out that although we intend to bring many of the values found within MKP into this community, it will not be directed or run by MKP USA. It will be our own separate community. And as I mentioned earlier, the vision that I will be describing is certainly not set in stone. So please make a note of any of the ideas that catch your attention so that you are prepared to discuss them during the breakout session and then in the large group discussion afterward. So first of all, there will probably need to be some sort of oversight group, particularly as we grow larger, to keep track of who is doing what and how it's all related. Initially, until things get going, ECJ might provide this function. However, we would welcome input and help from any of you who may have ideas or may be interested in becoming part of this organizing team. This community will likely primarily be made up of various affinity groups, which would be small to medium-sized groups made up of individuals who have particular interests, concerns, or tasks in common, or who may live in a particular geographic region. Let's take a look at some examples of possible affinity groups. As the devastating effects of the climate crisis become more severe, the emotional impacts will also become more pronounced, and it will be helpful to have a supportive place to process these emotions. Some individuals might have a particular interest in reducing their personal carbon footprint and would like to team up with others with a similar interest in order to support one another in making that happen. Some examples might include starting or adhering to plant-based diets. If this were adopted on a large scale, nationally or globally, it would result in a dramatic reduction in carbon emissions and would also result in tremendous personal health benefits. Others might have an interest in electrification of their primary residence, such as installing heat pumps, induction stoves, or solar panels. Such a group might be a source of information and encouragement for those wishing to pursue these types of projects. Similarly, others might be interested in exploring or promoting more climate-friendly modes of transportation, such as electric vehicles, bicycling, or public transportation. Gardening and food resources might be another area of interest. That could include things like food preservation, neighborhood gardens, and food banks. Another area of interest might be exploring and developing local resource sharing. Things like community tool libraries and bartering for skills, materials, or labor. Some individuals might want to pursue efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle. This could include joining or creating such groups as the Buy Nothing, Being Neighborly, and Repair Cafe groups that already exist. Others might be drawn towards taking action and want to work to influence political, corporate, or public policies and decisions. This might include MKP organization itself. For example, ECJ is actively working on revising and updating the role of the Earth Steward on the NWTA weekend. Some of you might have an interest in being part of our Climate Forum team. Over the last year and a half, ECJ has hosted 12 climate forums, including tonight's. We've discussed a wide variety of topics over this time, but certainly haven't run out of possibilities. Another possible function of these climate forums might be to have a place and a time for these affinity groups that we just mentioned and other members of this climate community to gather, share ideas, and tell others about what they've been up to. We might want to form an outreach team to work on building and expanding the community, either within or outside our MKP base. We might want to collaborate with other groups within the MKP community with which we share similar interests and concerns. An example of this might be the Racial Justice Action Team and Ending Violence is Men's Work groups. We share in common the desire to put an end to some sort of abuse, whether it be targeted along racial, ethnic, or gender lines, or directly against the planet. Some of you might have an interest in forming a local or hyper-local climate support community in the city, town, or neighborhood where you live. These are just some examples of possible affinity groups, and you might have other ideas that we invite you to share in the breakout room or the larger group discussion. There will need to be points of entry into this community and also ways to build and maintain ongoing connections within the community. Some possibilities for this might include a climate workshop, which provides everyone with a common experience. An example of this is the Resilience and Acceptance in the Face of Collapse course that some of you have taken. Completing a course wouldn't be required for an individual to become part of the community, but it would provide a common bonding experience and likely be helpful for them to integrate easily into the community. These climate forums could provide both an entry point into the community and also a place for members of the community to periodically gather and connect. Eventually, as the community grows, we might need to have an effective means to communicate and to interact. Perhaps at some point, we might want to create a website that could function as the hub of the community. So how might that work? First, there could be a public component, and that portion could serve as a point of entry. It could provide a description of who we are, plus give some contact information of how to get in touch with us. It could also provide useful climate resources, including educational materials with climate articles, videos, lists, and links. It could also be used as a means to announce events such as climate forums and workshops. At some point, there might be a need for an internal or private component requiring a login to gain access. That portion of the website might include lists and descriptions of certain groups and subgroups with helpful contact information for other members of the community. This internal component might also provide a means of communication and collaboration between groups and individuals. So how do we get there from here? First of all, we need to agree on a common vision. ECJ's vision for this community are the ideas that we are presenting tonight. However, as I mentioned earlier, these are not set in stone. We want to hear about the ideas that you may have for this community, and we plan to take those ideas, compile them, and then begin a process of brainstorming and negotiating with all of the individuals who might have an interest in becoming part of the community. We then take the common vision and share it with others like we're doing tonight. At some point, we may ask the board of MKP USA to adopt a statement on climate, similar, if not identical, to the one we presented earlier. We plan to offer the resilience and acceptance in the face of collapse course, particularly targeting MKP members. For those of you who aren't familiar with the course, we will provide you with additional information about the course later this evening. We asked the MKP Curriculum Committee to adopt and promote this course, and we're happy to report as of last month, they've agreed to do this, at least in a limited way. We hope to soon begin actively forming affinity groups based on individual passions and skills, and tonight is the first step in that direction. And finally, at some point, we may need to begin exploring the development of a website to support the needs of this community. So by presenting this vision that we have for this community of a community of climate warriors, we are taking the first steps toward the creation of this community. So with that, we will prepare to go into breakout rooms to get the feedback on what we're proposing, and we invite you to share other ideas and that you may have on how to move forward. So let me stop this screen. And I'll tell you about the little bit of the directions for the breakout room. We'll have either 4 or 5 persons per room. Some rooms may have an ECJ member in them. However, our purpose will be pretty much to simply observe. We want this to be a time for you to give us feedback and to offer your suggestions. You will have 14 minutes total time for the breakout, and that will give each person, not including the ECJ member, about 3 minutes or so to share. And in the breakout room, a clock will appear in the top of your screen to show how much time is left. And if you could please pick one person in your group to kind of keep track of the time to make sure that everyone in the group has your breakout room has a chance to share. And during the sharing, we would like you to focus on 2 questions. First, what aspect of what was presented did you like or were particularly drawn to? And second, what suggestions might you have to modify this to make it even better? And these questions will be posted in chat. I think Stu is doing that now. But to make sure that you have access to the questions, open your chat box and keep it open as you go into the breakout rooms. So is any questions? If there are, raise your hands or blurt them out. Otherwise, John will send us on our way. And we'll see.
I recommend I recommend copying the questions so you can repost them in your breakout rooms, because that's the way, sometimes the only way you can get them.
Okay, good suggestion. Kermit, you have a question?
I was just wondering, are there links to the documents that you shared tonight, which seem to be part of the discussion, or are we ignoring those documents for now and focusing on your presentation?
Yes, on the community. I think after the forum, we can send out links or where to get a hold of the statement, so you have a copy of that. We're not really so much focused on the statement tonight as more what was presented as our ideas about this community and getting your feedback on that.
Okay.
Okay.
And then is that document available in any form? I'm a visual kind of, it's like I heard it,
that is, and that's why I kind of asked to kind of jot down some of the things that you're particularly drawn to. We're going to take your comments and then alter our vision accordingly. We're going to get back to all of you that respond later. We're going to be a questionnaire to fill out, and we'll get back to you within the next couple of weeks. So that's how we're planning on doing that, rather than set out something now to everybody that may be changed later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
in terms of being able to react to it.
Yeah.
Having a prompt. I mean, I was taking notes but the presentation was faster than my hand, so.
Yeah, I realize that. Well, just do the best you can. And there'll be a chance for people to have feedback in the larger group too. So, well, let's go to breakout rooms, John.
Yes. Okay. So I've got the pleasurable and simple task of just orchestrating your guys' inputs. I was in a group with 3 guys who had some very, very energizing suggestions and ideas. What we want to do is get as many of these out as we can in about 14 minutes. We've got a process here using that Jamboard. Stu Kennedy and Steve Sim are going to be kind of recording. So please, in the reaction little tab down at the bottom, put your hand up, and we'd encourage you to make contributions of, what's up for you from all this so that we can capture them, as we say, as we try to build this community going forward. So every idea is a good one. And please share either something that's your own or something you heard in your breakout group that you said, hey, this is a really good idea. This is something these guys should know about and build into this community notion. Okay, who's
Robert,
got?
can I just clarify when Robert mentioned the reaction button at the bottom of your screen and asked you to raise your hand? If you click on the reaction tab at the bottom, and it'll have a raise hand button.
A little virtual hand will go up.
Click on that to raise your virtual hand. That'll move you into the top of the queue so that we can call, that Robert can then call on you, just to clarify, because we might not see all of you when the Jamboard goes up.
Are you ready for the Jamboard?
Yes.
Okay, Danny Jones, you're on.
Just one thing that I really want to say is Catherine Hayhoe, Hayhoee, how to speak and how to relate to conservatives and
Awesome.
how to be on the same team. So that's one thing that came out of our group.
Thank you, Danny. Robert Dan.
Yeah, I'm curious whether or not you guys are working with or made connections with indigenous groups, especially groups that are attending to river restoration, wetlands restoration.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, the question of are we, and then also is there part of what you're saying, Robert, that you think this would be something?
Yeah, I definitely think we should. I think that there are groups out there that are not political and that are more hands-on at the ground level, and especially indigenous groups that know a good many things that I judge we may not know in terms of how best to take care of restoring some of those places.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, I'm not seeing other hands up right now.
Rick.
Put your virtual. Kermit.
Rick had his hand up before me.
Oh, sorry, Rick. Yeah, go for it.
When it comes to talking to people that are different than myself or you guys with others, there's an organization that was called Better Angels, but they changed it to Braver Angels. It had something to do with Abraham Lincoln saying during the Civil War how we could be the better angels with each other. And it's about how to talk to other people that are a bit different, perhaps. And it's all about relationships and finding common ground. Find some common ground, like about their kids or something, and go from there. And then ask the question, I'd like to throw in a different idea and different point of view here. Do I have your permission to do that? And build relationships that way. It's called Braver Angels.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Kermit and then Carlos.
Yeah, an idea or an angle, I guess, of approach that I think has been even hinted at already in some of the ideas that were just shared. Working with existing groups. And in other words, there's groups like, the National Resources Defense Council, I think it is, NRDC, there's Citizens Climate Lobby that's advocating for federal legislation to address the climate on a bipartisan basis, and others. And so it seems like this group could be very powerful as a MKP facing mobilization, activation, and support sphere that could then help move people out to connect with groups that are doing different things, so we wouldn't have to be inventing all these different affinity groups necessarily. And at the same time, we could provide the support, the emotional support, for people that do find their way to these other active groups that are already well established and already pursuing important strategies, and keep them going. And that, to a large extent, that's been my experience with MKP. It's like, I'm the only hyper climate change active guy in my I group, but they know it, they support me, I come back, I have my tears, I have my anger, and they're there for me and help pick me up and keep me going. So
That's awesome, Kermit. And Stu, I think the piece to add that Kermit was saying, in addition to not recreating the wheel and the synergy piece with these other existing groups, is that the piece we would add is that kind of, emotional support, how to deal with the
Right.
shadows and the rest of it, is that
Right.
that might be something we bring to those other groups.
yeah, right.
Could add that in there. Okay, Carlos.
Thank you. I was very interested in, let's say, bringing out of the closet so many of us that have skills, experiences, and knowledge that doesn't really show up in our I groups or in our MKP activities. And I think that the main thing is to become really learned about the relationships in the environment. I mean, I'm an ecologist, a cultural ecologist, and look at change over time with society and environment being coupled. So this, I know there are more brothers out there that will do something similar. And so the talent that we have is something that is a real strong component that we must uncloak and learn about each other, so that we use that and draw from those experiences and knowledge, because the task is enormous. We're not trying to replicate. I mean, it's just at so many different scales, it's overwhelming. And I agree with what I've heard already, that the emotional support, the idea of maintaining balance as we go through these challenges, I think is going to be extremely important as elders. We may want to have that warrior in front of us, but at the same time, the elder function is one of how do we keep a balance, because these are all going to be very emotional issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And Stu, if you could get that last piece that Carlos talked about, particularly with the elder energy around balance, I think would be a really key aspect of what he just said. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, John Warren and then Federico.
Great, thank you, Robert. In Jacksonville, Florida, our new mayor, the first woman ever elected mayor in Jacksonville, has appointed a chief resilience officer. I would encourage all of you to see if your communities have anybody at the city or state level serving in that capacity, and see what you can do to support their effort. I'm in.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me see. Did you get a chance to get that, Stu or Steve?
Steve is working on that one. I'm having trouble editing here.
Okay. Let me give you a second or two to catch up. Are you elder balance back for Carlos? And then with Steve Simmer, was he getting John's idea about checking to see in our communities whether there's a resilience officer? Let me know when I can tell Federico to go, and then Sean. Yep, I see Steve. Okay, Steve's ready. Federico.
Yes, thank you. the one thing that comes to mind for me that I'd like to share is it would be helpful to have the group educate on what we can actually tangibly do. And I mean that both at the individual level, at your local community level, maybe state and national. Because I find that folks, a lot of them will nod their head and go, yes, this is important. But what they really don't know how to do is how to be part of something that, at least in their circle of influence, can make a difference.
Indeed.
And so the group might be able to educate on what you can tangibly do that's effective, that might get folks to move at whatever energy and risk they're willing to take in either in their lives or their exposure as they participate in this cause.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I guess what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Federico, is to help people be clear about what they can impact and affect, and not sort of waste their time and energy if it's not a good match for what they're putting their time into. Is that kind of the sense of?
Yeah, give people choices, and awareness is important and it's interesting, but it doesn't create activity. And so there's a ton of people who are aware about things, but what I always hear with the various issues that are existing around the world right now is, what can I do about it?
What can I do about it? Thank
We
you.
have to answer that question in a way that people can go out their front door and do something
So
that's
help,
effective.
yeah, kind of help people move from awareness to action.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Thank
Sean.
you.
And I think that the courses that you mentioned, I forget the name of it, but there was one that, what's the course that John mentioned at the beginning of lecture that's recommended is? That's
Resilience acceptance course?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, I think that's what we're just hearing about from Federico to some extent, is, I don't want to put a limit on what somebody might be able to do. I mean, because who knows what effect, and anybody might have it. But it's, anyways, my comment is, our group's name is Climate Justice, and Elders for Climate Justice. And so climate justice to me is a focus on the disparate impacts of climate change on other communities. And I think that's where I would like to focus in any efforts that I would get involved in personally, would be if I'm speaking to another a county commission or something, any legislative group or anything, then that's the perspective I'd want to take. And I'd want to have other people from those marginalized communities present if possible to participate and also speak up with me. That's it.
So you're saying, I'm picking up, Sean, you said particularly you're interested in focusing on the climate justice or injustice issues.
Correct, because that's, I mean, if we're Elders for Climate Justice, then that seems like the focus, that should be one of the primary focus of one of the primary focuses of the group, if not the primary focus would be climate justice. And to me, climate justice is the disparate impacts of climate on those who don't have as much. So.
Okay, thank you, Sean. We got Lewis, and then Carlos is coming back around. If someone else hasn't had a chance yet, we'll take them before you, Carlos, but I don't see a hand up. So Lewis, then Carlos.
Thank you. Yes, at an individual or group level or family or group level, what's extremely important is to be involved in the political process at all levels, local, state, and federal, because that's where real action, big action happens in the hands of government. And so be involved, know hopefully on a first name basis, your local representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to William, then Doug, and then back to Carlos. And John Whitty or John Layton has got to keep me knowing where we are on our overall clock, because I'm just trying to keep track of the hands that are up and get as much of this good information out as possible.
Yeah.
So, William.
Yeah, let's after Doug, let's go through Doug. We have 4 people's hands up, then we'll go on to kind of summarizing some of the general themes. We're about 5 minutes behind right now, so we're pushing it a little bit. So
Okay, and guys, if you don't get yours out, and other guys whose hands aren't up, please either put them in the chat or remember, we're going to follow up with you guys and are very, very eager to hear what you have to say. So, William, please.
Yeah, two things. One, the collaboration space on the web. I've got quite a bit of experience in that. I'd love to be part of the group that's doing that, or even chair that. So I think that's important for us to get up there as quick as possible, both in terms of visibility outside and working together inside. The other one is, I think one of the unique contributions we have is that a lot of the roadblocks that exist right now are with men who do not share our values, who are at the top levels of various powerful organizations. And we need to show that our values are what will take us to solving these problems, not the issues of money first or power first.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, William. And I was in this group. Doug, you're next. Doug's got so many things to share. Doug, you're going to have to kind of give us your best shot here.
Yeah, sure. I guess kind of in a summary, I think we should have a place where we can talk about ideas for things that can be done by each of us. And, you know, like in our group, one of the, I think it was Bob, talked about growing his own garden. I built a hot water solar collector last year. So I'm talking more of those hands-on things that maybe quite a few of us could have some ideas or have done something that we could contribute to. So it'd be kind of like, maybe it's even like a Facebook group or something, an ideas place to put those ideas or things that we have already done that we could pass on to other people that perhaps they could do with a little bit of training. So yeah, that's a bit, that was it.
Yeah, that's a great idea to kind of get an inventory of talents, as I think Federico talked about earlier. Was it Carlos maybe? And guys like Doug has so much practical wisdom to share. All right, final two, I guess, Federico and Robert.
Robert and Carlos, I think. Carlos, did you already speak, I think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll lower your hand. Okay.
Oh, okay. I think, Robert, did you have a chance to speak as well?
Yeah, real quick, I think in terms of forming or continuing to form the organization, there's two levels. I mean, if you think of an upward spiral, you've got the on the bottom level, you're going to bring people in, educate them, make them aware, and as they get excited, you're going to move them up to the action worker bee level, because there's already, I believe, many of us on this call who are at that level and ready to dive in, because the problem is so big and there is little time to get at it. So I think you got a two-level organization where you're bringing people in, educating them, making them aware, doing lectures, forums, teaching, and then, you know, you just...
Yeah, well, Robert, we'll take this and come back to you and others. I mean, another group that I think is going to be important is to figure out I mean, look at all the talent that's on this call tonight. How to best leverage everybody? How does everyone fit in, and how do we all relate to each other? And whether it's the two spirals Robert just talked about, but whatever, but figure out the best way we organize ourselves. So, men, again,
Robert, one more thing. Michael Fortune said he couldn't raise his virtual hand. Let's give him. He had, I think, he had something important to say. Can we do one more, and then we'll move into the summaries?
We're okay. Michael Fortune,
you're muted, Mike. Yeah, there we go.
You can hear me.
Yes, now.
Okay, I mentioned this in the chat that I am a meteorologist, and I am a member of the Society of Environmental Journalists, which is one of the best resources for current and continuing news and drama around the change in our environment in general, but including climate. I've also been a climate journalist for about 18 years, so I definitely want to use
these experiences to further your outreach to our audience. Thank you.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful gift to bring to this group. Thank you.
Robert, it
And-
was called to my attention that Carlos had something else to say. That if he did, we didn't mean to cut him off. I thought he had already spoken.
Thank you. So very briefly, we have an organization, it's MKP. And each time we meet, either in I groups or in the NWTAs, this would be an opportunity to sensitize men about what we are trying to do regarding the environment. Now, what I wanted to mention is my experience with Sierra Club and Environmental Defense Fund here in Las Vegas, which I would love for it to be like a pilot study of, the most, let's say, climate friendly. And it's not, it's driven by money, and it's driven by increasing expansion into the semi-arid and arid areas where there's no water and they continue to build. So we are faced with all sorts of, I don't want to be sound like everybody's naive, but there are people who are ankylosed in this system. They benefit from the system being the way it is. And I would like to be as optimistic as possible, but I have seen that even these organizations that are formed around these ideas like Environmental Defense Fund or Sierra Club, they have their agenda very clearly set, and it's set by Washington, or it's set by somewhere else, somebody's other perception of what's important. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have areas of Las Vegas, like East Las Vegas, where we have a lot of the people that work in the casinos and all that do not have the resources to have the quality of environment. And they're the ones that are being most heavily impacted. So there's much to talk about. I don't want to take up more time, but thank you for the opportunity to bring these things up.
So what's the headline there, Carlos? You want us to take a look at those kind of discrepancies between the haves and the have-nots in those environments?
Well, not so much the haves and have-nots. It's just that the priorities by the organizations that seem to be ideal to deal with environmental issues have their agendas that have nothing to do with what is happening locally, right? You've read about Las Vegas. Our trees are dying and we have no water, and it continues to expand, and all the wildlife is in our backyards now.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Stu, do you have a way to look at all these stickies at one time, or?
Well, they got
a couple pages worth.
I don't know how to drag things from one page to the other, but here's the busy page, and then we had some good ideas that spilled over onto the other.
Yeah, well, men, we're kind of winding down as we come down the home stretch of this forum tonight, and what we were going to do is just, we've all listened to the presentations, to each other in the breakout rooms, and now the sharing that to me was pretty awesome over the last 15 minutes. So we will certainly, when the meeting's over, look for the themes in here. Some people, like Michael's thing was what an amazing, professional set of skills that he brings to the table. Someone else was talking about the willingness to help with the website. So we've got some very specific things that already are clearly going to benefit this building of a community. A couple themes I saw were literally the importance of talking to other people who may not believe what we believe, and whether it's Catherine Hayhoe and other kind of models for engaging with folks, I think is an important thing. I think another thing that came up is a reminder of what we at MKP bring to the table as we look at interfacing with other groups and communities and organizations who are already doing work, particularly as I guess what you want to call emotional intelligence and dealing with that aspect of this. And the resilience and acceptance course came up. I mean, that piece is huge. I think you've probably seen some of the factoids in the news about the increasing, particularly in young people, anxiety and depression. And when people take a hard look at what's going on in this crazy world, particularly around what their future looks like, there's a lot of mental health issues. And I think the competence that MKP brings to help people deal with that came up a number of times, and it's huge.
Yeah. You just mentioned the RNA course, and I promised earlier that we were going to tell the participants a little bit more about that. So maybe if we can move into that.
Let's do that, John. That's awesome. And men, thank you. We'll be back in touch with you around following up with these ideas you have. What John's going to do now is talk about the resilience and acceptance course by asking one of our fellow brothers and attendees to share his experience.
Yeah, I want to introduce Thomas Griggs, who is going to tell you a little bit more about the Resilience and Acceptance course. Many of you know Thomas, probably know him. He's been around MKP for a long time. He's had many important roles, including a stint on the MKP Curriculum Committee. And more recently, Thomas has been quite involved with the Resilience and Acceptance course, first as a participant and then as a co-leader. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Thomas, and he'll tell you a little bit more about what you might expect from that course. Thomas?
My name is Dr. Thomas Griggs. Elders for Climate Justice recently hosted Climate Forum number 12, Visioning a Community of Climate Warriors. During the forum, I was invited to share my experience of the online course, Resilience and Acceptance in the Face of Collapse. While the forum is intended for an audience of new warriors, the following remarks do not necessarily reflect the position of the Mankind Project USA. The Resilience and Acceptance course is a gentle yet uncompromising introduction to the scientific and scholarly domain of collapse. For those of you who have worked with hospice patients transitioning to the end of life, you are familiar with the inescapable progression through the essential stages of dying, culminating in the transcendent experience of acceptance. This course provides this same perspective with the same uplifting, unifying impact, only now applied to our experience of the collapse of our own global industrial civilization. The course is free. It runs for 9 weeks and meets for 90 minutes per week, usually online. The assigned homework takes from 20 to 30 minutes a day to complete. The Zoom discussions are structured to allow people to react to the material in both small and large group dialogue. The course is convened by 2 leaders assisted by participant volunteers and contains a comprehensive array of materials that, in my judgment, have been curated with great sensitivity. Each participant self-regulates according to how much they can absorb, as this material is pretty intense. Now, I've been in the Mankind Project for over 30 years. And during that time, I spent a number of years serving in the curriculum circle, creating a theoretical framework to unify all of MKP's offerings and helping to create a comprehensive catalog of all the project's offerings. In my judgment, this is the single most important offering ever to come out of the New Warrior community, including the NWTA. And I want to share why I say this. We are all aware of an increasing cascade of environmental and ecological tragedies. It is overwhelming, at least to me. It's too much to take in. I cannot keep track of all the bad news and all the threats. I have too many emotions to sort out. And this presents a unique but not an unknown dilemma in which I'm certain I'm not alone. Back in the early 80s, when the world was living under the threat of nuclear war, psychiatrists identified the phenomenon of psychic numbing to describe the defense mechanism of ceasing to have feelings about the unthinkable horror of a nuclear holocaust. More recently, we've been hearing about COVID fatigue, which is a similar, if minor, example of the same response. I'm convinced that we are responding in exactly the same way to the environmental crisis that now engulfs us. That is, we have been living in massive denial, characterized by psychic numbing. Even though scholars have been writing passionately about the predicament of global collapse for over 50 years, this course was my first wake-up call. It's the first place I found an explanation of everything that had gone wrong with my world, including what had gone wrong with Western civilization. It is the first place I found that tied all the climate change and social disruption together in one unified accounting of our history. It is the first offering to break through my own psychic numbing, my own struggling denial, and provide an honest assessment, not only of where we have come from and where we are, but most importantly, where we are headed. I no longer assume that my future will even remotely resemble the vision I have held all my life. And with a profound reordering of my expectations, my priorities have also radically changed. That which used to be important no longer is. I can no longer participate in activities that presume we have multiple generations to accomplish our salvation. I no longer believe in changing the world one man at a time, because we don't have the time. Actually, we never did. My focus now, like Bill Kauth's, is in the creation and support of local affinity mission groups who together might soften the impending transition. This is what I mean when I say this offering is even more important to us than the NWTA, because the demands we are facing now are requiring us to place our conception of our future as the most important variable in our everyday decision-making. Let me say that again. The demands we are facing now are requiring us to place our conception of our future as the most important variable in our everyday decision-making. I fervently hope that all new warriors will join us and rise up to the preeminent challenge of our generation. And the common language and frame of reference this course provides is an excellent place to begin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thomas. That was simply awesome. And I just want to point out that this course, as tremendous as it is free. It is offered as a gift from the creators, including Steve Amond here on our forum, and two other people, Doug Della Pietra and Mary Gleason. So, we're going to move on to what comes next. And very briefly, we are going to ask you, we're going to bring up a link in the chat. John, do you have that there? A link to the Google form? Or Steve Simmer, are you going to put that in the chat?
It's coming from Steve.
Okay. So this is a very short form. It'll take about maybe 2-3 minutes to fill out. What we want to begin this dialogue, and what we want to do is be able to contact you. So we're asking for your name, email address, a good phone number, and answer a few questions about your interest in what you've heard tonight, or other ideas that you might have, some of which we captured in the chat, but we really want to know what you think personally. So if you can click, open the chat, click on that list that says Climate Warrior Forum, and that should open up the very short questionnaire. And it will, it's pretty self-explanatory, and
and the last question is whether you're interested in the course that Thomas Griggs just told us about, because we can send out information as the courses open up.
Yeah. So in addition to the name, email, and phone number, there's some check boxes. The first one, becoming a part of an emotional processing or support group regarding climate. From our previous forums, we've had men that had expressed the lack of availability of some place to process some of these emotions or get support for some of the work they've been doing around climate. So this might be something that you might be interested in, and just hanging out with and being in touch with people that could support you with that. The second box, it has to do with the affinity groups. It has one example, a couple examples there, but if you're interested in any of the affinity groups that I mentioned during the outline, check that box, and then below on the last box, the fifth one that says other, just to indicate what affinity group or groups you might be drawn to, or add one of your own. The third box down is an action team to influence MKP or other entities around the importance of climate issues. That might include some people that might be working with Citizens Climate Lobby or some other things, but you want to do that as with your MKP brothers. The fourth box down is becoming part of an organizing team to create and develop this climate community. You know, we're going to need help with this. The seven of us from Elders for Climate Justice certainly, obviously, can't do it by ourselves. So we're looking for any help. Some of you have kind of already indicated an interest in that. So just please check that box if you are, and maybe indicate in the other what part of that you might be interested in. And then lastly, would you be interested in possibly participating or finding out more about the collapse and resilience in the collapse in the face, acceptance in the face of collapse. So if you are, check that, and we will certainly get back to you. And our intention is to get back to all of you anyway, if you fill out that form. And we really want to get a sort of one-on-one dialogue to kind of put the pieces together. So does anybody need more time with the form before we wind things down? Danny?
You're muted, Danny.
You're muted.
I had to log back in. I don't see any form.
Okay, look at in the chat. Steve Simmer said Climate Warrior form. It's a link.
The very last item.
Oh, if he came out and back in.
Second to last item.
It's not there.
He just came back into the meeting, so it won't be in his chat.
Can you put that in, Steve?
I will. I'll do it again.
Or somebody could just send it to me.
Dan, I think, Dan, is that the link to that you put in, the same link? Yeah. Dan Klimke just put that link in. Sean put it in. So click on one of those last three links there. You guys are more technically savvy than I am, that's for sure. Do you see it, Danny?
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Thanks,
Jonathan, while he's doing that, I'll point out that in case somebody can't wait until tomorrow to find out more about the RNA course, Steve Amon has given a Gmail address there that you can copy and send a message to right now if you want. You'll see that in the chat.
Okay, so I think that Danny can probably finish filling out that form while we kind of, the rest of us, if you are all finished with that, we can kind of take things home. John, maybe.
Very good. Thank you very much. So as we come to the close on this climate forum, I first want to thank all of you for your attendance. Hope you're inspired to continue the work for our planet, and leave you with this video.
How lucky I am to be alive. I see redwood trees and mountains, flowing rivers to the sea. I see the same beauty in the eyes of you and me. Can't believe how wonderful the world is. How grateful I am to be alive. But Mother Earth is crying, Can you taste her tears? Future generations are depending on us here. 'Cause I can see how fragile the world is. Winds are blowing, storms are brewing, ice is melting, oceans rising, nature's calling, trees are falling, birds are dying, the earth is crying. Can't believe how bountiful the world is, how awesome it is to be alive. But the way we've been living, we take more than our share. I don't know what we're thinking, if we're thinking that we care. I know that times are scary, but there's a feeling in my bones that we can work together to make this place our home. Let me be how beautiful the world is. A peaceful planet, let's grow with it, make it flower, solar power, water flowing, gardens growing, people glowing, let's get going. Can't believe how beautiful we all are, how lucky we are to be alive. But our grandchildren are crying, I can hear them weep. If we don't make some changes, what we sow is what they'll reap. Let them see how beautiful the world is. Let us be how beautiful the world is. Let us see how beautiful the world can be.
We are complete. Good evening. Sleep well.